Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be looking at a elite crossbow that is a little strange, and if you have had trouble trying to figure out what to do with this crossbow, you are not alone, because I also have trouble trying to figure out what to do with this crossbow. This is the Hellrack Colossus Crossbow, and it has some pretty interesting damage. It's 105 to 300 damage. It's actually kind of nice, damage-wise. But it also has a 77 dexterity requirement and a massive 163 strength requirement, which is kind of insane. It is an end-game level bow, though, so hopefully by the time you put this on, this crossbow, you're doing okay. We also have a level requirement of level 76, which is kind of high. End-game level equipment, that's basically what this is. It's a relatively slow bow, though. The crossbow is slow attack speed, I believe, and it has 20% increased attack speed on it, which makes it a normal attack speed bow. So when you take it out and you actually utilize it, you will notice that it's just very slow. It's a very slow base. It's a very slow crossbow, and it doesn't really have the oomph to really push the damage. As you can see, it's not very fast. Let me use something that's a little easier to see. I mean, it's got pretty big distance in between the shots, especially when you compare it to the bow that I did just previously, which was the gut siphon, which was really fast. And this is further complicated by the fact that it kind of seems pointed at elemental damage, which is silly because it's not an elemental damage bow in terms of speed. And I've noticed this kind of dichotomy between items that were crafted in Diablo 2. For some reason or another, they would put all this elemental damage on the bow, and then they would make the slowest bow, or they would put all this elemental damage on a weapon and it would be the slowest weapon. And it doesn't really make any sense to me, because when you create an item like this, which is elemental damage, you immediately think fast, because if you're a holy freeze paladin, you want a fast weapon. If you're a holy fire paladin, you want a fast weapon. If you're a holy shock paladin, you want a fast weapon. If you have elemental damage on a weapon, you want to apply it quickly. You don't want to shoot super slow and have a bunch of stupid really long pauses in between your shots. This bow also, or crossbow also, has a massive 230% enhanced damage, which does vary from 180 to 230%. We also have a bonus to attack rating of 150%, which does vary from 100 to 150%. So two pretty big variables there for the crossbow, which can make it rather poor. We also have a massive 63 to 324 fire, 63 to 324 lightning, 63 to 324 cold. So we basically have spectral hit added to our attacks. If you add it all up, I mean, it's a pretty high amount of damage. And if we take a look what it looks like on our character panel, we end up with, let me go to a regular attack here. We go to 842 to 2,868, with a lot of that being elemental. As we talked about in previous videos, Exploding Arrow and Freezing Arrow actually add in the cold and fire damage that you use. So the 324 cold damage would get added to Freezing Arrow when you use it, and the 324 fire damage would get added to the Exploding Arrow when you use it. So keep that in mind. Also, Immolation Arrow. And speaking of Immolation Arrow, we have level 18 Immolation Arrow charges, 150 of them, which is kind of massive, and actually you could use 150 Immolation Arrow charges is a lot. And since it adds in the fire damage from the crossbow, and it also functions with the synergies, so we end up with the 5% average fire damage from Fire Arrow, and we also add in the 10% from Exploding Arrow. So if we have both of those and we fire off the charges will actually apply a pretty nice amount of damage, especially when you consider the additional damage that the fire damage that the bow has. It's going to apply some pretty nice damage to our targets. Is it going to absolutely murder them? I don't know, but it's not bad, and 150 charges is certainly going to last you a long time. So if you want to fire those off every now and then, maybe you're strictly an exploding arrow Zon, which a lot of Amazons do. They don't build Immolation Arrow because it's 20 extra points and they don't want to do that. So you would build Fire Arrow and Exploding Arrow instead. And quite honestly, it would basically provide you with free Immolation Arrow to use on your character, which isn't too bad. The other thing that Hellrack comes with is 2 sockets. And I can't help but say in my mind, what the hell would I put in those 2 sockets except for 2 shale runes? Like, I feel like there's no choice. It's such a slow bow or crossbow that the only thing you can really do is put in 2 shale runes to make it faster so that it actually attacks quick enough so that it's a livable speed. Because as it is, without those shale runes, it's so slow it's ridiculous. With the shale runes, though, it's actually not terrible. Let me see if I can find some monsters to actually shoot real quick. Come here, little monsters. As you can see, with 2 shale runes inserted into the bow, it does actually fire fast enough to be kind of useful. And the elemental damage on the bow isn't bad. The real issue that I have with the 2 sockets is that there's like no other thing you can do with the sockets other than put shale runes in them. Like the crossbow is so slow that if you don't put the shale runes in there, it's kind of unusable. You would be better off, like for instance, if it was a faster bow, you'd be better off with something else. You know, like maybe some ED jewels, or maybe putting in some more elemental damage, or customizing it more specifically to one form of elemental damage. But what it kind of does is it kind of forces you to use the sockets to fix the main flaw of the unique, which is that it's just too slow. But once you put those shale runes in there, it's actually pretty fast, and it actually hits hard enough that it does a pretty decent amount of damage to the targets. I mean, once you fix the flaw of the weapon, it's not a bad crossbow. As you can see, I was able to take out these monsters in hell difficulty fairly quickly. And this is Players 5, if I remember correctly, because I still never changed it from Players 5. So Players 5 hell difficulty, and she's killing pretty quick with this thing. I'm trying to really think exactly what you could do to get the most benefit out of this, but it's really kind of hard to envision what exactly you'd want to do with it. I mean, you wouldn't have much trouble killing anything. It might take you a little while because you've got 4 elements. So you've got fire, lightning, cold, and you've got your physical damage. You could even add in poison if you wanted to be like completely multispectral. I feel like an interesting use for this might be a character that's not an Amazon. That's right, a sorceress. A sorceress could probably get better use out of this crossbow than an Amazon. And why is that? Well, sorceresses have some pretty amazing abilities which can multiply out the elemental damage on the crossbow. The fire, the lightning, and the cold can all be multiplied out by the sorceress by using things like fire mastery, lightning mastery, and also cold mastery will enhance the cold damage that it does as well. You could also put on enchant to increase your fire damage even further and your attack rating and end up with a really nice 3,109 to 6,676, and this is using relatively low level enchant, so it's not even really that high. Basically what you're doing here is you're taking advantage of the elemental damage aspect of the bow, or the crossbow rather, and you're utilizing the massive amount of elemental damage that it has. You can also use the Immolation Arrow charges to further enhance the damage even more, and get some interesting uses out of it. And as you can see, I can pretty much just one-shot. Well, actually, this is normal difficulty. I forgot she doesn't have access to hell. That's sad. You know, I've always wondered why you can't put the crossbows on the bow girls. I always felt like the crossbows could have been really interesting on the rogues, but you could never put them on the rogues, which is rather silly. Just in general, the crossbow definitely does have some interesting uses as far as like a a physical immune killer. You could certainly use it to kill physical immunes. The Immolation Arrow is rather interesting as well because it does offer some rather interesting ways to build a character. Would it necessarily be the most like optimal build? Probably not. I feel like the Hellrack is not going to be the optimal choice for just about any build, but it could serve you well until you find your optimal item. I feel like on an enchant sorceress specifically, you'd be better off with a demon machine. And the reason why is because it doesn't have any piercing effect on it. When it comes to non-Amazon characters, they really need piercing effect to become viable. And since it doesn't have any piercing effect on it, that would force the sorceress to have to use Wisdom and Razor Tail together to get 66%. Whereas if she used Demon Machine, which has 66%, she would only have to use one item to reach 99%, which is a far better deal. Demon Machine is also much faster with a negative 60 base, and quite honestly, I just think a better choice all around for an enchant sorceress. Let's take a quick look over on Silo's Pen, and let's see where we could potentially find this item if we want to get our hands on it. And let's see. All right, so Hellrack is a relatively high-level unique, and as you can see by our list, we've got basically nothing on it. It does look like Hell Mephisto has 1 in 887, so not bad. Neelathak is 1 in 3,694. He's actually pretty easy to farm. And it looks like Bale and Diablo are our best choices at 1 in 480 for Diablo. I probably wouldn't farm Bale unless you were just doing him for EXP. Doing him. That sounds wrong. Sounds dirty. Don't do Bale. He's got too many tentacles. That's gonna be a hentai. Grand Visor of Chaos, Infector of Souls, and Lord de Cease also have pretty good chances, which kind of reaffirms farming Diablo. Eldritch the Rectifier is not bad. We got Pindle Skin, not bad. 1 in 5,769. Doesn't look like you're going to have much trouble finding this. Thresh Socket drops it. Also, same probability as Pindle. Hephaestus the Armorer is not bad either at 1 in 6,478. A lot of good choices. Honestly. I don't really see much issue in finding this. You should be able to farm a lot of those guys and probably get a drop pretty quickly. The real problem is going to be trying to get one that has a good bonus attack rating and good enhanced damage so that you can socket it with what you want. It's one of the really big downsides of all of the many socketed items, and I've noticed this, is that when you have an item that has like 2 or 3 or 4 sockets or whatever, you are in a situation where you don't want to just like slap your good runes in there and waste them, right? So you want to find a good version of the item, something that has higher stats to put your good runes in. So you end up just putting a bunch of crappy stuff in the lower ED versions, and you hold out for these, you know, better versions that have the higher ED and the sockets that you need, and they never come. And by the time you end up finding one, you've already like found a freaking wind force or something, or made yourself a faith bow, and you've moved on with your life. And it's a pretty big downside, I think, to the sockets, especially when the sockets are variable. That's one of the worst ones, is you finally find a good version of the item that has high ED and good stats, but the sockets are only like one socket, and you're like, oh, yay, and you just like throw it straight into the garbage, like bounce it off a building, it hits a telephone pole, bounces off a Kane's head, smacks into the stash, does a rimmy jimmy, and then falls into the trash can. Like, that's the kind of like jank you do with them ones that don't have the right number of sockets. You're just like, bah. Bah. Yes, I just like that too. Not bah. It'd be like, bah. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and let me know what you think of the Hellrack crossbow. I'm kind of curious because I don't think I really quite understand the Hellrack crossbow. It's an oddity, and I like oddities, but this one doesn't seem to be a good oddity. It seems to be a bad oddity. So as always, keep watching, and